Today's conversation is so much fun. We got to interview Dr. Kirk Parsley, the sleep guy, a former Navy SEAL and an MD. Doc Parsley has an incredibly unique and diverse point of view that makes him a very specialized expert in topics pertaining to sleep and stress. He's also just very entertaining. Please enjoy our conversation with Doc Parsley. Hi, I'm Erin Power.
And I'm Laura Rupsis.
We're certified health coaches, and this is Health Coach Radio.
This podcast is about the art, science, and business of health coaching.
We share our insider tips to help you become a better coach and entrepreneur.
And we interview expert guests to discover how they've made it in this growing field.
It's time for health coaches to make an impact.
It's time for Health Coach Radio. Dr. Kirk Parsley, how are you?
I'm well. How are y'all?
We're awesome. We finally had to just be like, okay, we're not recording. We got to just get started because we could just go on and on and on about this stuff. Erin and I could talk about this stuff all day. I know you can too. We're excited to talk to you. I know Erin and I think we were first introduced to who you were even at Paleo FX at like the very first one we went to, right, Erin, like 2016 or something like that. And so we've always been aware of you and your work, at least from the outside looking in. So we're excited to talk to you. Would you mind filling our audience in, give a little background as to kind of your origin story and who you are?
Sure. I was born and raised in Texas, like rural Texas. I was actually a terrible student, high school dropout. I dropped out, got a GED, joined the Navy, wanted to do the toughest training in the world, which I'd only learned about like a month before I joined. There's some video documentary on Navy SEAL training, and it's the toughest in the world. And I'm like, I want to do that. And so I went and signed up for the Navy. I didn't even know what a SEAL was. I just knew it was supposed to be the toughest training in the world. So it gives you, a little insight into, my cognitive state in my early years. Very impulsive thing to do, but I joined the military. By the grace of God, I made it through SEAL training, having no idea what I was getting into. And then, went to the SEAL teams, spent my time in, that was kind of what we call it the Hollywood days of the SEAL teams, because there was really no war. We had that Gulf War that was just like a little bit of skirmish, a few people shooting pistols. Did 3 deployments and just kind of figured, like I've done it. It's like kind of the same thing over and over again. We're just doing new, same trips, different guys, and just kind of cycling. And I thought maybe I'd go do something else. I'd met a girl. I was in love and, wanted to get married and have kids and all that. And in those days, there are very, very, very few married SEALs. It's not a job that lends itself well to that, obviously. So I left and started I had to go to junior college because I wasn't even qualified to go to college with the GED. And so I went to junior college, and I thought I might go to physical therapy school. My wife, the woman I was dating at that time, she was in her master's program to get for physical therapy, and I used to read her textbooks on deployment and stuff. And and to go back a little, like I was always like a fitness kind of geek and nerd. Like I thought I was dumb, but I was strong and fast and athletic. And so I honed on that. And so I, started lifting weights at like 8 years old, and like had reading nutrition books, like book Eat to Win. If you've heard of that, I read that when I was like 10 years old, and I was going to be a vegetarian because I was smart, whatever. So I thought maybe I'd be a physical therapy student, and you need 2,000 volunteer hours just to apply to PT school. Wow. And so I was like, well, that's a lot of hours. I better get going. And so I started volunteering at San Diego Sports Medicine Center. That's where I'd been a SEAL. So I stayed there. And pretty quickly they hired me as a physical therapy aide. And then I worked up to an assistant. And I did that all through college. But I pretty quickly decided I didn't want to be a physical therapist. It's just a little too limited. It's like too prescriptive. Just kind of do what people tell you to do. And a couple of the doctors there that because I'd already been a SEAL in that time gap, the young doctors there were about my age, maybe like 2 years older than me, and they started trying to talk me into go to medical school. And I was like, well, pump the brakes there, Sparky. Like I'm a high school dropout and, started getting D's and F's in third grade. I'm not medical school material. And the doctor who owns the clinic, Dr. Lee Rice, he walks out and he overhears the conversation. He says, Kirk, the question isn't, could you get in? The question is, would you go if you got in?
Right.
And I said, of course I would go if I got in. And he said, well, then you really got to try, don't you? It sounds like you want to do it. So I got guilted into medical school. So that, that's like two career choices that were just like whimsical. And so I did that. And when I was applying to medical school was when I found out the military had their own medical school. And I was already married and I already had a kid, another kid on the way. And they were going to pay me to go to medical school instead of the other way around. And I didn't really have any passion to go back into the Navy, but I thought, well, I can go back into the Navy. I can go back to the SEAL teams. I can give back to that community that kind of saved my life and formed me as a man. And so that's what I did. And then, went through all my training, residency and all that stuff. And I went back to the SEAL teams as their physician, really well steeped in sports medicine and orthopedics, fully expecting that's what I would do. I got there at a time where they just received their funding to build their very first rehab facility. And so they put me in charge of building out the rehab facility, which was essentially San Diego Sports Medicine Center inside the SEAL team. So I knew exactly what to do and I knew who to hire and all that. And we got great people from the Olympic Training Center and from professional sports teams and from college teams, and just had this an incredible breadth of knowledge and specialization through this clinic. And so then, of course, I was the dumbest guy around. And when you're the dumbest guy in the military, they put you in charge and they say, okay, now you supervise everybody. And so my job was technically to supervise all these experts who knew all kinds of stuff I don't know. I'm like, all right, well, I don't really know how that's going to work. And but my office was in that center. And SEALs are a lot like professional athletes, and that the worst thing you can do to them is put them on the bench. You could literally say, I'm going to shoot you in the foot or put you on the bench. And they'll like shoot me, right? Like that is the worst thing to do. So the most likely person to disqualify them from their job is the doctor. So they just lie to their doctors and they just say, everything's great. And if there's anything wrong, they spend money out of their own pocket and they go find somebody in town who'll do it for them. And they find a doctor and they work with them. But because I had been a SEAL and I'd been a SEAL recently enough to where there were still lots of guys there that I trained with and deployed with, they trusted me. And, it starts with one guy and he comes in and he like kind of, conspiratorially shuts the door behind him and says, hey, let me tell you what's going on with me. And he starts listing out this litany of symptoms, cognitive, emotional, performance, body comp, kind of like the gamut, like anything kind of you would say is a performance issue. Like I'm not performing as well as I would like to. He was complaining about all of those things. And I had no idea because I was a Western trained medical physician, right? So like I knew how to recognize and treat disease. They didn't have any diseases. I was like, I don't know, like I just started shotgunning and just said, well, let me test everything I can think to test that could be related to performance. And so I think I probably just had them draw every lab that I knew of, that I knew how to interpret. And no idea what I was thinking, what I thought I would find. But I started thinking, this was 2009. So I started thinking, well, maybe like you've heard of like combat fatigue and shell shock and the previous wars. And I thought, well, maybe it's that, like whatever that is. Like nobody, I didn't really know what that was either, but at least I knew that was a thing. I was like, maybe it's that. And so I started pulling their labs, and everything anabolic in them is low, and everything catabolic is high, and inflammation is high, and oxidation is high. And even though they're like ripped and 7% body fat and abs, they like have insulin sensitivity to this like pre-diabetic, and they just metabolically look like they were 30. They look like they're 30-pound overweight 50-year-old men. Or 50, 60-year-old men. That's what their blood panels would look like. And and I didn't have a clue, but because I was the doctor for the West Coast SEAL teams and the SEALs had already developed quite a bit of notoriety, I could call anybody and say, hey, I watched your TED talk, or, I read your book, or I heard you on a podcast. And I'd say, can I consult with you? Can I come train with you? Can you advise me on it? And every single person like fumbled over themselves to be helpful. No one ever charged me to work with them. Nobody ever charged me to mentor them. And I got to mentor a lot of really great people, and I got to learn a lot really quickly. Probably would have taken me 10 years to put it all together on my own. And I got to learn it all in probably like a year and a half. And, I first started thinking this was maybe adrenal fatigue, because that was kind of a big thing in those days and I was like, well, maybe it's this adrenal fatigue thing. So I was treating on that, and the Navy, shut me down on that. That was voodoo, witchcraft medicine. I wasn't allowed to do that. And then I just kind of started bouncing around kind of these nebulous areas. And then I'd say like, I don't know, 40 or 50 guys had been in my office, and I'm interviewing a guy, and they all told me the same story. Like they was so similar. I was accusing them of like briefing each other on what to say, because it just sounded like the exact same story from every single guy who came to my office. And he mentioned taking Ambien, and I thought, seems like a lot of guys take Ambien. I make a little note in the margin. And then, go on with the interview. When he leaves, I go back and look through all my files, and every single guy who had been in my office was taking Ambien. And I thought, maybe there's something there. Now, again, Western trained physician, I have no idea what sleep is, what happens while you're asleep, what Ambien could possibly be doing that could interfere with sleep. I'd taken, in medical school, I'd learned in pharmacology that, Ambien was a GABA analog, and that's what I knew. I wasn't really sure what GABA did for sleep, but I knew it was a GABA analog. So anyway, I learned a lot about that. I just, for reasons we can expand into later, I once I learned a lot about what goes on when you sleep, or what's supposed to go on when you sleep, and what doesn't go on when you use alcohol, and what doesn't go on when you use sleep drugs, I thought, well, this could actually explain every single symptom these guys are complaining about. And I wasn't naive enough to think it would explain all of them, but it could potentially. So we'll see what it does. And so I came up with a concoction of supplements to get all the guys off of Ambien, and they got everybody off of Ambien, and their testosterone tripled and quadrupled, and their IGF-1s went up, and their homocysteines went from 15 to 5, and their HSCRP went from 10 to unmeasurable. Their insulin sensitivity increased. Like everything got better. Their performance got better. And it wasn't 100% solution, but it was like 80% solution for probably 80% of the guys. And the piece that I put together later on was the traumatic brain injuries. And we have, like, every SEAL just has thousands of TBIs. And so I started messing with that like the last year I was there. But the way anybody ever heard of me was we did these retreats for the SEALs before and after they deployed, because it's obviously it's a big strain on a family to send the dad out to combat for 6 months and then come back and reintegrate, do another platoon where they're home 25% of the time, and then go deploy again. And so we would rent out these resorts, and we would have speakers come in, and we would show them all the resources, talk to them about the things they're likely to experience, try to educate them to where they understand what's going on with them when things start going on. And we would have, like, Colonel Grossman came and talked about the psychology of killing, his book on killing. And they brought in guys like Rob Wolf and John Wellborn and, Chris Kresser, and kind of like that whole sphere of the health influencers. And at that time, I was pretty much the only guy talking about sleep. And my lecture was like 2/3 sleep, 1/3 nutrition. And Rob's lecture was 2/3 nutrition, 1/3 sleep. So we kind of hit it off and had a bromance. And he started introducing me around and like inviting me to do like health symposiums and be a speaker. And I went on his podcast. I went on lots of other podcasts. And then I just became a sleep guy, but sleep is a component of what I do. It's what I'm best known for. But what I I parlayed that when I got out of the military. Of course, I just left a huge vacuum, because the military was not a fan of me doing what I did, and I got in all kinds of trouble for doing this voodoo medicine that I was doing. And the biggest vindication of my life is 5 years after I got out, SOCOM hired me to come lecture all their healthcare providers about what I'd been doing that I'd been getting in trouble with for all these years. And that's still on their portal. And and SEAL Team 6 brought me into, and so I was like, okay, I won. Like I won that one. But anyway, I left this vacuum when I left the SEAL teams. And so they kept calling me. And so I just sort of, I was now that doctor out in town that they were going to see. And I just wasn't charging them. Like, they had to pay for their own meds, any kind of pharma or any type of supplements. But I did all the consultation for free. And then, gotten on the advisory panel for lots of nonprofits that help SEALs specifically. Some of them do, more than that. Some do like a broader, first responders and special forces or whatever. And so I've continued to do that, but I just took the private consulting and I'd left brick and mortar actually to start the sleep supplement business and did private consulting, thinking I would do that for a year. And then 10 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. And the private consulting, I had just a flood of people who wanted me to help them perform better, because I've been working with the most performant men in the world who are suffering. And if I can help them perform better, who can't I help perform better? And so now that's my story. That's why I am who I am now. And that I do private consulting, I help SEALs, and I run the sleep supplement business. And there you go. That's a wrap.
I'm so excited. I'm so excited about so many things that we can talk more about. I just also think it's from an origin story perspective, how it's wild. You made all these like impulsive decisions, SEALs, physical therapy, med school, and then actually were able to bring all of that very unique cocktail of experience together to be the perfect guy, really, to run this orthopedic rehab facility within the SEALs. Like it's great. It's kind of crazy how the universe delivered you, or you delivered yourself to that outcome.
It's kind of hard to believe it's a coincidence. It's right. It's a little too perfect. There probably isn't a more perfect man on earth to have come back to the SEALs in that capacity. So it's a pretty cool, pretty interesting. Yeah. Just sort of trusting your gut or whatever that was that you did to go through that big journey. I think someone's been looking out for me. It hasn't been me. I don't make very good decisions, but somebody's been looking out for me over my life, I think. So
yeah. What I really like though is I was really moved by the part of the story where it's like this, like I get it, like you can envision these Navy SEALs that don't want the doctor to know that they are hurt or tired or sick, because I totally get it. So they're sneaking around to doctors outside and paying out of pocket, and then finally there's an ally in you and they felt they could trust you. So it really completely changed the narrative for SEALs to increase their performance, get better. So I just think that's really wonderful. It's really neat. Wild to hear that these guys were so metabolically unwell. Wild, but also not totally surprising. I mean, is it the stress? So obviously it's the sleep. So we know it's the sleep, but I mean, is the stress, the pressure of the job at play there too? Is the nutrition and fitness set up for guys in the SEALs? Is it supportive of good metabolic health?
When I got put in charge of that facility, that facility was a component of a nationwide program for really all special forces. They called it, the different branches called it different things, but we call it the tactical athlete program. So we hired nutritionists, and we hired strength and conditioning coaches and exercise physiologists and sports psychology. And like we hired all the stuff, all the things that you would have thought SEALs would already have. You're like, no, but nope, we had nothing. Like going up into 2009, we had one athletic trainer literally working in like a little construction trailer that had, like a stationary bike and a table in it or something, but and it wasn't that people weren't wise to it, but the bureaucratic red tape in the in the military, it takes like 10 years to get your funding for something. So they had been moving towards this. They knew the need was there. But by the time the guys were coming to my office and talking to me, y'all actually, since y'all were early into the paleo scene, you might know Josh Everett. He was like a big name CrossFit. So he was the exercise physiologist, or he was the strength and conditioning coach we hired.
Oh, get out of town.
And so we had guys training with Josh, and we had we had a nutritionist, and we had exercise physiologists who were in there, like not really doing research, but like assessing programs and collecting data and kind of like advising training cadre on like how to optimize things. And it was really kind of the beginning of the proper treatment of SEALs. But the way it works is leadership in the Navy changes every 2 years. And when the new leader comes in, if he doesn't think your program is valuable, you get put on the back burner. Some guys come in and like, I need bullets and boots, and other guys are like, no, I need a healthy force. And, and it just depends on, their leadership. And so it kind of comes and goes in waves. And almost everything that I helped build, and I don't want to say I built it, but everything that I was a significant component in building, like almost everything we built out was almost completely gone like 4 years ago. And now it started coming, but now it's like reversed itself, different leadership, and now it's coming back in the waves, So that's unfortunately the way the military works. And you also have to remember that the people who are making the decisions on this are war fighters. They're military leaders who know military history and world history and geopolitics and combat philosophy, and that's what their expertise is. And that's my supervisor. And so I have to explain to them how these things are impacting their forces. And a lot of them don't know enough to be able to understand what I'm saying and take me seriously. And I tell this story all the time, and it is, hand to God, this is a true story. I got laughed out of the leadership's office and told I needed to go back to medical school when I told them that I thought their sleep deprivation was impacting their hormones. And I said, because they were all convinced, well, all these guys who have low hormones took steroids, and now that's why their hormones are low. And I was like, that's not true. Not only do I trust my patients more than that, and I knew they trusted me, because if guys had done anything, they told me they did it. It wasn't, and plus they're so young and so healthy and so active. These aren't guys who are, took steroids for 6 months and shut down their HPTA axis for the rest of their life. That's not happening, man. They were young, fit guys. Maybe they were going to come back 10% diminished or something, but these guys were coming back, normal testosterone range from 250 to 1100. They were coming back 256, 253. And I would send them an endocrinology and they'd say, that's normal. Like, what do you want? That's normal. And I'd be, oh, that's normal for an 85-year-old man. That's not normal for a 28-year-old SEAL. And so, there's a lot of ignorance around that. People well-intended.
And that example you just gave is sort of like one of the most perfect examples of the old adage, if you hear hoof beats, think horses, not zebras. Like, these guys are all, hormonally tanked. Oh, that must be because they were abusing steroids.
Yeah.
But
right.
I just have like this is a very ridiculously goofy anecdote, because it doesn't, but I was in the Army for 10 years. The Canadian Army, okay, and not the Navy SEALs. So if the Navy SEALs are here, the Canadian Army is probably somewhere very far away on the spectrum. But I remember in my basic training, I went into basic training a very, very fit. Like, I was a strength training, fitness junkie, nutrition obsessed, very lean, very healthy young woman. And I left basic training a hot mess. And part of it was because they would, just the pressure, and they're trying to make it super intense for you. Not to the, obviously, the extent of SEAL training, but I remember we would have 5 minutes to go into the mess hall and eat lunch. You got 5 minutes to go and eat lunch and be back out here. So what are you going to do? 5 minutes to eat lunch. You're going to go right for the chocolate cake. So I was on chocolate cake for my 6-month basic training, because that was the only thing I had time for. just this kind of goofy. And I actually said to one of my sergeants, I was like, I really think we need more time to have more nutritious meals. And by the way, if you just ask me nicely, I would do the push-ups. Like I was pushing back on this. It didn't go over well. Didn't go over well.
Sounds me
You don't
nice.
need to be rude about this, all
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Anyway,
can't we
so it
reach a
was.
mutual agreement?
Yeah, that's right. It was a very unhealthy environment actually, and everybody kind of came out of it beat up. And I guess that's the point. Like that's kind of the point of it, I suppose, in some ways. But
Yeah, and there's, and I appreciate that there has to be, a very robust dogmatic system to push through people and screen them for what you want to train them for, right? So like and everybody's been in the military knows that basic training doesn't train you to do anything. It should be called basic screening, right? So you go in there and they beat you up for a period of time, and then they figure out if you're durable enough to train and you're smart enough to train. And one of the reasons I believe, I've never found any evidence of this, but I need like a investigative journalist to figure this out. But I firmly believe that one of the reasons we sleep stress people so much, sleep deprive them, chaotic sleep and all that, is because we're trying to cause psychotic breaks in people who are susceptible to psychotic breaks.
oh,
And I don't know if anybody had like the forethought to actually figure that out as a system, or just the observation of the correlation and be like, hey, if we really stress people out,
yeah,
if they're going to break, they'll break now. And then we know, right? And so, and SEAL training, we go a week without sleep, right? And that's just part of the screening process. And that's it. You've already been through basic training. You've already been through, you've probably been in the Navy. When I went through, it's kind of different. You'd probably been in the Navy a year before you went to SEAL training. So you'd already kind of been through that basic stressor. Now you're going to go through this more severe one. And so now not only are we looking for mental stability, but when you're truly suffering, will you keep performing? Like where your motivation, will you still be moral? Will you still make good decisions? Are you somebody we can rely upon? And SEAL training was the same thing. Like there's no way to come out of that in bad shape, depending on what you consider shape. I mean, you're very, very, I lost like almost 50 pounds in buds because it's just so enduring. It's just all about calisthenics and running and swimming and, a lot of sleep deprivation and food deprivation and all this. But, in high school, I played football, ran track, did shot put, did some powerlifting, and did some martial arts and boxing. So I was like a speed power guy, and this was all endurance. And so, when I graduated buds, I could do 2,000 push-ups in a row, but I couldn't probably bench my body weight, and, I went in there pretty strong, having been a powerlifter before. So like, but again, that SEAL training doesn't train you to be a SEAL, and like they're just beating you up to see if you're going to break. But unfortunately, that psychology gets embedded in the military, as most people know. I mean, you look at how many times do you hear once a Marine, always a Marine? You meet somebody and you think about this, like they spent 12 weeks in an intensive program that reprogrammed them for the rest of their lives about like how they like what they value and what they think. And I'm not saying it's 100%, but it like geared their thinking and it flavored their decision making for the rest of their lives. So it's a really impactful thing. And so when you get into the SEAL teams, there's all sorts of instances where it's like, hey, we need to go out and do this mission. Or we're going to go do this training exercise, whatever. And we've got 3 or 4 days to plan it. And then we have to do it. And it's going to take a day or two. Well, guess what? Over those 5 to 7 days, you aren't going to really sleep much. You're going to catch a nap here and there. And if you need to sleep when somebody else thinks you should be working, well, then you're just weak, and that and so nobody wants to be weak and nobody wants to say that they need to sleep, but everybody's decision-making capabilities, everybody's self-awareness is just decaying every single day. And I made the case to them because there's so much research about comparing sleep deprivation to various other forms of impairment. And there's really clear links or correlations to blood alcohol levels. So you sleep deprived people and you have people get slightly intoxicated and you test them on various things. And so when you've been awake for 24 hours in a row, you perform as though you're right at that limit for driving, around a 0.08 blood alcohol level. Like that's your performance equivalent. Now, once you've been awake for 36 hours, it's like, a 0.1 something, 0.1234, something like that. And once you've been awake for 48 hours, you perform as though you have a blood alcohol level of 0.2, which you
Wow.
pretty much have to be an alcoholic to be able to get to a 0.2 and still be conscious, So it's really bad performance. And I was telling the leadership, you're sending guys on target drunk, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they are performing like they're drunk, and you're sending them with machine guns to go make life and death decisions. And I don't know if either one of you saw my TED talk, but in my TED talk, I do this little bit about, like, imagine you're getting ready for surgery and your surgeon takes a shot of whiskey and puts a shot glass back in his pocket while you're sitting there, and you'd be like, whoa, what the hell are you doing? Right. And he says, oh, don't worry. Like, I never have more than one drink every 3 hours. So my blood alcohol level never goes above 0.05. And, like, I'm totally safe to operate. Like, you'd haul ass, right? Or if your pilot did that or anything else, like, but that's what we're doing with our SEALs. Like, you're spending 3 to 4 days getting ready for something, and maybe getting 5-6 hours of sleep total across those 3 days when you're getting ready. And now you're going to patrol out. Now you're going to do an assault, and you're going to make life and death decisions on people. And then, so fortunately, some leadership listened to me. And once I started getting really good results, and what really won it over for me was, there's an area, there's a command right next to the SEAL teams called WARCOM, and basically that's the leadership of all the special forces, all the Navy special forces, and some of those guys became my patients. And once those guys became my patients, then everything doors started to open. Then it was like, oh, okay, maybe we should listen to this. And then they took me out to, like, the training sites, and simple things like we blacked out all the barracks where people were sleeping. And if people were supposed to be asleep and they're awake, there was red lights everywhere. Like, if you went into the galley or like the whatever they called the rooms with the games and televisions and stuff, like, all the light was red. And then they kept the barracks super cold so people could take naps. And we adjusted training to where they do a training block in the morning and come home and take a nap in the middle of the day. Plus it was 120 degrees outside, so it made sense to do it anyway. And take a nap in the middle of the day, and that accelerates learning, right? Because when you train and then you sleep, you come back better than you left the training. And so you can take a nap and you come back just like you'd slept all night, and then you train again and you sleep that night, and now you get 4 days of training in one day, essentially. So they did listen, and we made some changes. Like I said, it's ebbing and flowing. But when I go to events now, or if I get asked to lecture anywhere, and really kind of anywhere in SOCOM, everybody I talk to, whether they know who I am or not, doesn't matter. But everybody I talk to seems to know the importance of sleep, and talks about getting their sleep and measuring their sleep. And I'm just like, yes. I mean, that's one, like, that's at least one thing, and probably the most important thing for the resiliency, because it obviously it's not a realistic job.
Yeah.
To do for 20 years. Like,
there's so much technology and so many new businesses that have come forward around sleep. We've got these cool mattresses, these smart mattresses, mattress pads. You've got rings that you can wear, wristwatches that you can wear that track all this stuff. So in the sort of performance world, they totally get it. And so you said something before we recorded, that you've got your sort of private clients, that you only take a certain number. I charge an obscene amount of money because these are the guys that actually help pay for me to help these SEALs, which I think is a phenomenal model, right? And we talk to health coaches all the time when they really take a look at what they would need to charge to make the living they need in order to make it a sustainable business. They almost feel guilty about it because they have this altruistic side to them that is what brought them to health coaching to begin with. That they feel bad charging people. I'm like, you gotta get rid of that. And that the more successful you are, and the more this model plays out in so many industries where you have these early adopters, financially independent individuals that tend to be the leaders that pay top dollar for kind of top shelf that actually can help fund some of the sort of lower price tickets or the ability to work with people for free. They're subsidizing almost scholarships and things like that. So kind of getting rid of that point of view, having that subset of what you're doing that allows you to sort of build this other side, this altruistic side. And performance is the area where the kind of person that's going to be drawn to that kind of service will likely have the money. They're highly motivated. You can get fantastic results. You can learn a lot that you can then turn around and apply to a less, I don't know, I guess privileged population, for lack of a better word.
Are you a health coach who wants more hands-on coaching training? Are you thinking about becoming board certified? Primal Health Coach Institute's Master Coach Certification Program checks both of those boxes. It's live, so you get to ask questions as you go, and we cap the number of students for each round so you get individualized attention and plenty of opportunity to practice your coaching skills with faculty and peers. Coaches become great with experience. And this course fast tracks that educational experience so you don't have to spend years learning directly from clients. You'll know exactly how to coach for optimal results in just 12 weeks. It also prepares you to sit for the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches exam so you can become a board certified health coach. We only offer this certification program twice a year and it fills up fast. So be sure to learn more at primalhealthcoach.com and reserve your seat soon.
Well, I just get some great advice about this because we all struggle with that psychology. Like,
Yeah.
you know, we all do. I think, of course, I think Western medicine by and large is a completely broken show. I'm sorry, I don't know if y'all are PG or whatever, but
No, it's fine.
that's a broken system. I don't know that I don't even know that that's salvageable. But you know, when I went into private consulting, I had no idea what to charge. You know, I'd been in the Navy essentially most of my life, or pretty much all my life. Right out of high school, I was a SEAL. I did that for 6 years. I went to college. I worked part-time and went to college full-time. Then I went to the military again. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, I was in my early 40s when I got out, and I'd never really made any real money, you know, but you think what I thought was a lot of money is a joke compared to what like my private clients now would pay me, or even what I think is a lot of money now. Mm-hmm. But back then, you know, it's all our own reference. And so I thought, man, I was wringing my hands like, man, I don't know if I could charge $500 an hour. That seems crazy, but like, I'm going to try that. And of course, if you trade time for money, it doesn't matter how much money you charge, it's always a bad deal because you only have so much time. And you know, and then I just continually elevated my prices, and I started making sort of package, and then I switched to like, it's only an annual program. I don't do anything else. It's just, you have to be an annual program. And so all of my clients, or, you know, the vast majority of my clients are, you know, 45 to 65-year-old men who traded their health for wealth for 20 or 30 years. Now they have all the money in the world. They don't care about the money, but they're in terrible physical shape, and they're about to have grandkids, or they have and they want to be healthy again. And they usually come to me wanting to be like a Division I athlete again. And I'm like, yeah, well, let's lower expectations a little. But you know, because I spend probably 100 hours a year with most of my clients, I mean, they all become good friends of mine. Right. And I was talking to one of them. One of them was basically telling me just last year that I should double my rate for my clients. And I'm like, that is insane. There's no way anybody's gonna pay. Like, I have a hard time. Like, I still to this day feel a little bad. I got on my way to explain to them the reason this is so much is because I don't charge the SEALs. So this is philanthropic work, and maybe I should set it up to whether it's like partially it's a tax donation. I don't know, but I go out of my way to explain to them, you know, this isn't all for me. Like, this is, you know, this is why we do it that way. And, you know, one advantage is I only take 5 clients a year. Is one advantage is no matter what goes on with them, I can figure it out. I can spend 2 weeks working on one problem for one client because that's what we need to do. And I can fly around and meet with experts and become friends with whoever's like the guy with all of that stuff. and so the guy trying to tell me to double my rates, and I was just saying, well, that's crazy. And he said, you know what your problem is? We'll just throw out a number, like whatever, 50, let's say $50,000. That's not true, but let's so he says, you think you need to do $50,000 worth of work. You need to add $50,000 of value to their life.
Mhm.
Right. And depending on how much money you have, that could be a lot of value you need to add. Right. Like if I make 50 grand a year, you better revolutionize my life. Right.
Yeah.
But if I have $100 million in the bank and you, for $50,000 of value, it's like, yeah, I feel a little better. I mean, like, that's not a whole, like, these are guys that spend $50,000 on a 4-day vacation with their family, like this is not a lot of money to them. And I don't use those numbers to be specific about anything. It's just the concept of what you're saying is you're going to add that much value to their life. You're not saying that my work to you, like my hourly rate is going to add up to this much over the course of this program, because you're getting all this stuff that I've learned over the decades I've been doing this, things that I can handle in a, I can teach you something in an hour that took me 3 years to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now you have 3 years worth of value in that, in that 1 hour that I've taught you something, And so I think that's that was a really good mindset shift for me. When I heard that, I was like, oh, that makes perfect sense. Because, to this day, even though I make a lot more money, my clients are still so much like, the orders of magnitude wealthier than I am. And so I still feel like what they're paying me is a lot of money. And they don't
Right.
they just don't think it's a lot of money.
But if you've come up a couple times about kind of the Western medical model and just what a show it is to just, but what you just said there in terms of the pricing things based on the outcome achieved, right? That if you let's say you price, let's say, let's say a health coach is charging, $1,500 for a 12-week program. It's not in terms of the value of the hours you're spending. It's the value that the outcome your program is designed to deliver. So if you want to go forward and charge $5,000 for that program, is the problem you solve worth $5,000 to that person? If the answer is yes, go forward with confidence.
And you just have to find the person that it is worth $5,000 to.
Exactly.
Right? Honestly, I wouldn't pay me to do what I do for myself.
Mm-hmm.
But it's because I know so much already. Like I know I'm the one who knows that. So it's like, I don't need that much help. But if I made the amount of money that I make right now, and I, was Larry the sheet metal worker, and I knew nothing about health, and I had some big health concerns, and I didn't trust Western medicine, and I didn't want to be on a bunch of pills, and I didn't just want somebody to manage it. I wanted to improve my life and get my health back. I wanted to be better than I've ever been, or like as good as I've ever been, and not just managing this disease. Like if I were that guy and I could do, and I know I could do what I can do for them, like hell yeah, I would pay that. Like that would be a very easy decision for me to make. And all of your coaches just need to realize, I can't go to a freaking gala or fundraiser or mixer at any kind of event. I can't go and keep my mouth shut and not help people, right? Because they start telling me things that like what they're doing, and I'm like, oh no, that's all wrong. That's a bunch of bunk. Like here, like I can't stop myself from doing that, right? And I know your health coaches are the same way. It's like they want to help everybody, but guess what? You could put this to any health coach. It's like, if you had $100 million, what would you do? You would say, almost all of them would say, I would do exactly what I'm doing right now, and I wouldn't care about money. I don't even know if I'd charge people. Like I would just do what I'm doing, right? So, okay, so you're in your passion job. So you've just admitted that the best you would ever be at that job is if you weren't worrying about money. Oh. So just charge as much money as you need to not worry about money, and you will find the people who will pay it. What mine has always been word of mouth. I've never advertised. I mean, I guess talking about it on the podcast kind of as an advertisement. I had somebody call me out off of a podcast one time, but for the most part, it's just like, these guys know each other. They have friends who are like them, and they say, hey, well, their friends are like, dude, you look great. You're like, what's going on? And they're like, well, I'm working with this. And then I get that client, and that's how that works for me. But essentially it's a testimonial, right? And so, like I have one client who's a big marketer, and he's like, and he's an uber wealthy, very successful guy. And he's like, hey, Doc, man, I'm going to do an infomercial, and I'm going to show my before and after pictures, and you're going to charge $1 million, and I'm going to make you rich. And I'm like, no, we're not doing, but that's who you need. You need like some raging fan who's just going to like, tell everybody and get them to shoot a video, do a bunch of lectures and just talk about your results, like volunteer to go around to gyms and corporations and do lectures. I mean, a lot of people don't even know the value of a health coach, right? They just think, oh, that's somebody who's going to look at my exercise program or something and tell me what not to eat or something. It's like, no. This person's going to change the way you think, and that's going to change the way you behave. And once you've changed your behavior, it's going to change who you are, because the results you get are different when you behave differently. And now you're going to get the results that you want, and you can get them for the rest of your life once you know enough.
Right.
And I always tell my private clients, like, my goal at the end of this year is for nobody on this planet to know more about your health than me. But the second place, the person who will be closest to me is going to be you. And none of your doctors are going to be the expert anymore. You're going to be the expert on your health.
That's awesome.
And that's what a health coach does to me. It's like, I change how you view health and how you understand health. And once you know yourself and you know the levers to pull and push, we all know, like, if you're in terrible shape, it is a big hill to climb to get into shape. But once you're in shape, how hard is it to stay in shape?
Yeah,
man, that's pretty easy. I mean, that's a joke, right? It's like, I know what to do. I know when I'm getting a little off track. I can just do a little more of this, do a little bit of that, push this, pull that, and I can stay, I can screw around and have too much fun for 3 or 4 months and go, oh, I got to get myself back in shape. And, that's a 2 or 3 week goal, right? To get things. And that's just the way the world is, but you can't do that if you don't know enough. Like, if you don't know how to do it. And I tell other people too, it's like, $1,500, if you're charging $1,500, like, do you think that somebody could go buy books and take courses and know what you know for $1,500? Absolutely not. I mean, there's no chance. It's like I don't know how to put a price to my education, but I would say with the expertise that the people I've trained in and the amount of time I've done it, it would take you $500,000 to $1 million in 3 or 4 years to know what I know. And I'm not charging you anywhere near that, right? It's like, it's a small fraction of that.
Consumers are already wise to this, because consumers hire experts for everything. You need your roof replaced, I'm calling a roofer. You need the gas line installed, I'm calling the gas fitter. So this makes the case for establishing yourself as an expert and standing in that. I have an expertise, and we teach our coaches to, like, declare yourself a world expert in something, and just go. And that's the kind of stuff that you don't shut up about at parties. I'm the world expert in this thing, and I can't shut up about it because I'm so excited about it.
Right.
But the idea of value and cost is so interesting. I had a discovery call with a prospective client just before I got on this call with you guys, and she lives in South Africa, and her only options right now on the table for weight loss are to work with me or bariatric surgery. So because she's very petrified, she's petrified of the surgery. Of course she is. She did try the weight loss injections, but the side effects were too miserable. Anyway, the surgery is 300,000 South African rand, which is $16,000 US. And I said, okay, so is that the price you're willing to pay to lose this weight forever? She said, yes. I said, well, I've got great news for you. My program is a fraction of that.
Yeah.
And if you can frame it that way, like, think about what sometimes your clients will articulate to you what the dollar value is. I got lucky. She articulated to me that she was willing to pay 300,000 of her dollars, and that's amazing. But the thing is, if the coaches, you don't need every client. You need 100 clients who are so sold on what you do who are like, here's my credit card, where do we start? And I think to your point, Doc, is that where health coaches shine is this sustainability piece. Because how many times have I gotten on the phone with somebody, because I do work only in the weight loss space, and they'll say, I tried this, I tried this, I tried this, this. I tried all these things. They worked for a while, but none of them were sustainable. And they'll say that about everything. They'll say that about keto. They'll say that about vegan. They'll say nothing was sustainable. And my perspective is, oh, that's just because nobody taught you how to sustain it. I got you. That's exactly what I do. That's the purpose of our relationship, is to teach you to sustain it, self-efficacy. So you go off on your own and you're good to go forever.
Yeah. And, you know, what I do with my private clients, you know, is I set annual goals, and then we break this down into quarterly goals. And like, you know, what we were talking about earlier, I don't care what your goals are. It could be like, I want to be better at business. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father. I want to be in better shape. I want to lose, you know, 10 or 20% body fat. I want to get faster, stronger. Like, I don't care. Whatever your goals are, we'll figure out how to do your goals. And it'll be no surprise to y'all that 80% of what I do is sleep, exercise, nutrition, and stress mitigation, lifestyle. Like, that's 80%, because until you optimize that, you know, there's ideal, like we can come pretty close to ideal with all the different metrics we can measure on people now. And we can say, this is damn near the ideal way to do everything. But then there's reality, right? Because people have lives and things get in the way, and there's a gap in there. And the gap in there is like when you need somebody who knows mitigation techniques and tricks and gadgets, and like you can add gadgets to help you learn how to meditate or whatever. You can put in, you know, peptides to help you improve your hormone profile, or maybe you need hormone replacement therapy, or maybe you have you know, some sort of healing problem you could use some hyperbarics for, or whatever. But and so I have like a million gadgets for just that gap. But you know, that gap is never enormous, right? You know, it's not anywhere near as big as most people think it is. Now, I mean, of course, if you're a single mother of 6 and you work 3 part-time jobs, and you're like, okay, I probably can't help that either. But you know, most people, you know, they're not at that extreme, and they think that getting anywhere near that ideal is just a completely incomprehensible mess. And all you have to do is read 3 popular health books to know why, right? Because all 3 of them are going to tell you different things to do, and they're going to be dogmatic that you have to do this precisely, because if you fail once, the whole thing's over and you should have never even tried, you loser, you know. And that's not how people get better, right? Like, the other thing I tell my clients is like, you're actually going to have fun along this year. Like, you're going to enjoy all of these interventions. There's going to be some things that'll be hard for you to do, but there's going to be we're going to break it down into bite-sized pieces, and you're going to feel proud of yourself once you can do it. And then it's just going to be a habit. It's going to be easy, and you won't even recognize yourself. And I always record them at the beginning of the year. I do a video conference on them and ask them all kinds of questions, and then I show that to them a year later.
Wow.
I mean, huge emotional breakdowns almost every time. They're like, I can't believe I was that bad. I can't believe I was that. Like, I can't believe I was that. But anywhere along the way, I would have said, how much you've changed? Yeah, you know,
Right.
again, like, you know, 2%. But add that up over the course of a year.
How long did it take you to arrive at this? It's got to be a year-long program. And what went into that decision? You know, because like I think Erin and I would both agree with you that for many people, for something to really stick, especially any kind of big change, about a year for many people, especially some of the people that have a lot of weight to lose, right? But it's a tough sell for a lot of, especially new health coaches. So do you mind speaking a little bit about your program, maybe where it started, how you came to like this annual thing, and what went into that decision?
Yeah, well, I mean, I started out really, like I said, I just started out hourly,
Yeah.
and that was easy for me. Like, when I got out of the Navy, is the first time I really had any time to be available. And I'd been on a lot of big podcasts, and I'd been on Dr. Oz, and I'd had a TED Talk, and so people knew who I was, and you know, people contacted me routinely, and so it was pretty easy. Like, I had way more patients, like way more potential clients than I could treat, and so I was like, well, you know, I'll just charge by the hour, and not just thinking I was going to handle that one thing that they contacted me about, right? And then we know that, well, that it doesn't work. Like, it's
You pull the thread
that
and
one,
everything.
like that one, yeah, that one little thread, like that's, that's a tapestry that fills the wall. And like, you're going to find so many problems along that way. And I really just kind of felt like a year was the minimum that I could help people in, because, you know, the reason there's so much disparate information on health and the health industry is because almost everything works. It's just like, if you know how that applies and if that applies to you, and not everything works for everybody, and not everything works forever. You have to understand the nuances and know why things are working and why you're doing what you're doing, so that when you don't get the results you want, you know why that happened. And so there's a big educational component to it. But the behavioral changes, behavioral changes are so hard. That whole thing about whatever they say, 30 days or 60 days to form a new habit is absolute crap. Like I read, like you could Google that and like just put that phrase in and like debunked or something. I can't remember the exact story, but it was some little tiny psychology study, and it was like something so rudimentary. It was just like this tiny little thing, and all it basically meant was that people were doing it subconsciously after that, but didn't mean that it stuck. It didn't mean that they understood it. Didn't mean that they appreciated it. So most of my clients, by the time they've come to me, they've seen 15, 16, 20 functional medicine doctors and experts and health coaches and trainers and whatever. And they've expected them to prescribe something, right? Whether that's a medication, a supplement, an exercise, exercise program, a diet, whatever. Like, they're going to prescribe this thing for me and it's going to fix me. How could that possibly work? Like, you wouldn't try that with anything else in your life, would you? It'd be like, hey, I'm having relationship problems with my wife. Can you prescribe something for me to fix that? Like, no, like, you have this long, complex relationship with your wife that you need to figure out what's going on and how to move forward with it. And health is the same way. It's like, there's not one thing you're missing. Like, if your health is so good that you're down to, like, turning one little dial to reach peak performance, you probably don't need anybody, right? Like you've gotten it down that far. But the vast majority of people, that, like, they don't understand. They're like, hey, I heard this, this keto diet is helpful, or intermittent fasting. Like, that just means I'm not gonna eat. And they think that's going to fix them or something. Or I'm going to follow this online programming, and I'm going to follow this other guy's online programming for nutrition. It's like, well, maybe the exercise programming you're doing doesn't fit that nutritional program whatsoever, and you're doomed to fail on both because of that. But how are you going to know that? And so, like, there's an educational component, but to change a behavior is the hardest thing in the world. People come to me, like, they know I'm known as the sleep guy, and patients or clients, whatever, they come to me, and I say, I have this annual program. We tell them whatever, and then they decide they want to work with me. And I have this very long questionnaire intake process. I screen very heavily, and I will say, I want you, hypothetically, like, if I said eating nothing but kale, would you do that? And they're like, yes, I would eat nothing but kale. And I said, you need to exercise 3 hours a day. And yeah, I'll do that. And you need to meditate 2 hours a day. Okay, I'll do that. And I want you to sleep 8 hours a day. They're like, whoa, I don't have time for that. I can't do that. And I'm like, all right, well, how about you don't do any of those other things and you just sleep? How about that?
Nice.
And that's how hard the behavioral, because we all have our programming in there, and we're so prejudiced against certain things. Like, there are people who are prejudiced against animal products, and they're prejudiced against sleeping. If you sleep too much, that means you're lazy. If you're not getting up early, then you're not working as hard as the next guy. And people have all these deep-seated beliefs they don't even know they have. And it takes a long time to do that. And one of the reasons it takes so long is because it's really hard to change once you know the problem. But those things don't reveal themselves immediately either, right? It might be 6 months before I actually figure out what's the psychopathy behind that poor decision, sort of pattern that you run over and over again in your life. And it takes me a while for, one day it'll hit me. I'm like, oh, okay. So, like, now we're 6 months into it before this is actually the biggest key to turn. I get that one. And now that opens a lot of other things and we can keep moving, you know? And of course, one of the biggest things is sleep. You know, it as soon as you get people to sleep consistently, they're kind of different people already. If they're chronically sleep deprived, and you just say, you know, hey, we're going to work on the quality of your sleep. We're going to work on the psychology around your sleep. And we're going to work on the psychology while you're sleeping. We're going to work on your belief system around sleep. And I'm going to educate you why sleep is important and how it's enhancing your life. And once you get people on board with that, somebody who's been sleep depriving themselves for 20 or 30 years, if they get 1 month of 8 hours of sleep per night, everybody they know will say they've transformed as a person. They'll be like, oh, he's so much happier and nicer and kinder and smarter and funnier and more entertaining and easier to get along with. And he looks better, his posture's better. He's so much more alert and he's happier and he works harder and like everything about you changes. And people will look back and they look back at those years like they were in a fog. Like it was like they were in this gray kind of, you know, 1970s Soviet kind of movie. It's like, man, I can't believe I lived in that lifestyle, but they don't know it while they're in it, you know. The self-awareness of your ignorance is the biggest problem.
Yeah, I think you're making a good case for a couple of things. First of all, you're making a really good case for a very long duration program. And I have to say that you know, I work with people in 12-week increments, and it doesn't feel like enough. It used to be 8, now it's 12. I think you know, feels like it's starting to feel like people actually, first of all, people are vying for programs. They want more long-term help, the health consumer themselves, because they know that behavior change is hard. Also, this makes the case for just like really drilling down into a specialty, like somebody being a sleep coach, which is ostensibly kind of what you are in a manner of speaking. You work with a lot of other, you know, systems as well, but like that is it's such a powerful health tool. And I think a lot of health coaches think they have to be experts in everything. Like I have to be an expert in fitness and nutrition and sleep and stress and whatever else it might be, relationships and finances and all these. But you could and I think should in some cases just zero in on one thing. This is the expert model, obviously, but
Yeah.
it's
I mean, there's something that everybody's passionate about, and there's like, you know, there's something that like you know, I have this metaphor like sitting in a doctor's office or dentist's office waiting room. You know, if there are 10 magazines on the table, what's the one thing you would always read, right? Like, what's the one thing you would be excited to pick up if there's variety? It's like everybody has a passion, and you know, and honestly, like I wish I knew more about nutrition, and I wish I knew more psychology and more about mindfulness training. Like I continue to educate myself, I continue to get better, but I have experts I rely on. Like I have clients, they come up with problems like, I don't know, like I gotta call the big guns, and like I gotta call Rob Wolf and figure this biochemical pathway out. I gotta call Peter Attia and like figure this thing out about their, you know, lipid story or whatever. Like I gotta rely on experts too. But you know, like as an example, you know, what ended up sort of being my passion is sleep, not because that's an exciting topic, but because that's so powerful. Like when you understand what goes on when you sleep and you understand what happens when you don't sleep, if you really understood that, you wouldn't deprive yourself of sleep, period. You just wouldn't. That would be completely impossible if you really believed it, you know? And so I really got into that, and you know, as Laura talked about earlier, there's all sorts of gadgets now. There's beds and monitoring devices and wearables and, you know, mouth taping and blue blocking glasses and flux on your computer. Like, oh, there's all these different things that you can do. There's a million different things that you can do. And then I also work with supplements, and I work with peptides, and I work with pharmaceuticals, and I work with hormones, and I work with hyperbarics, and I even advise. I don't do anything with them, but like advise around psychedelics, and I have a lot of tools in my toolbox. And the most powerful thing that I do by an order of magnitude is a 4-page worksheet to help people get stress out of their sleep.
Yeah.
It's a handwritten worksheet and I can explain it to my clients in about an hour. They can put it into practice that day. The psychology shift of it takes 4 to 8 weeks. But once you hit that psychology shift in there, you will never have problems sleeping again. And it's just, and we can we can offer it for your coaches. Like just
That'd be great.
we can just do like a link. It's behind a paywall on my website, but it's cheap. We'll give it to y'all for allow me to blab to your audience. We'll make a link for y'all, and you can download that. But 90% of the reason people don't sleep well is because they have too much stress hormones. They're not metabolically ready to be asleep, and they're not metabolically ready to stay asleep. And all I'm doing is changing how they're thinking about it, right? Like of course, when I first work with them, I'm going to assess everything. And like, I might be doing supplements. I might be doing peptides. I might be doing hormones. I might have them doing, any number of things. But what really shifts the quality, duration, and consistency of their sleep is changing the way they think about it. And I just over the years just kind of fumbled into, working with one client after another, just kind of honed in, well, okay, these are the really important things to teach. And then I had this program of like what to do. And I hadn't thought clearly why, and I didn't teach why. And then I kind of step by step figured out, oh, this is how they would understand it if I explain it to them. And then I just, sort of reverse engineered my own worksheet. And then I was like, oh, okay. And now I just explain to them like the logic behind everything. And it's so easy. Like, you can teach it to a third grader, they'd understand it. And then it's a super easy practice to maintain. And if you want to use electronic gadgets, you can. And if you don't want to, you don't need to. And like I said, it's super easy to understand, super easy to implement. But once their psychology shifts, it's over. Like it's over, and it's over forever, because it's not something you can forget. Like you can't ever forget it. And basically, like the elevator pitch of it is that the best you will ever be at any point in any day of your life is about 90 to 120 minutes after you wake up, and for about 3 to 4 hours after that. That's the most capable you are. So everything that's stressful in your life that you need to do something about, you should be handling then.
Right.
And the best preparation for that time is sleep. So you shouldn't be dealing with that when you're asleep. That's the worst time. Like sleep is the one thing you absolutely need to protect so that you can be good enough to handle your stressors. And so why let those stressors interfere with your preparation for those stressors? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so once you get people's minds around that and just show them like, these easy things to do, it's like, you make a to-do list and a to-worry list, and you set an alarm clock to get ready for bed, an alarm clock to wake up, and you think about these things, and this is what you do when you wake up. And this is what you think about. These are the things you don't do. Obviously, you all know most of these things. You don't look at the clock when you wake up. You don't, turn on lights. You don't do activities and like all that stuff. But it's the psychology about, hey, the whole reason I'm going to sleep tonight is to repair my body for everything, my brain and my body, everything I did today, I got to repair.
Yeah.
And then I got to prepare for tomorrow. And my brain is going to use today as the template for what I need to be able to do tomorrow. So that hopefully I wake up better tomorrow, better able to do what I did today, or at least as good. And if we could do that 100%, we would never age, right? Because we'd wake up exactly the same every day. We'd like wake up completely repaired and completely prepared, and we would never age. And when you're a kid, that works, right? You actually go to bed, you repair more, and you actually wake up smarter and taller and stronger and faster, right? And then it plateaus like 20, 25 to 35, that kind of plateaus, and then it starts going the other way. And you aren't, it's like 0.0001%, you're not there. And that's aging. And it takes 8 hours to repair and prepare. And if you choose to just do 6, well, you've just chosen to age 25% faster, and you've chosen to perform 25% worse. And you've chosen to elevate your stress hormones because that's how you compensate. If it takes 8 hours to repair, I only sleep 6 hours. Tomorrow still comes at exactly the same time. How do I get through the day? I release more stress hormones. And I use stress hormones to elevate all of my metabolic systems at the expense of my body, because I'm using my body and my resources as the fuel source to get through this stressful day. And it's stressful now because I didn't prepare. I'm not prepared for it. And now I can't sleep because my stress hormones are high. Now I get bad sleep. I am not ready for tomorrow again. My stress hormones keep going higher. I can't sleep because my stress hormones are high, and my stress hormones are high because I can't sleep.
It's a vicious cycle.
And people live their whole lives like that. People live their whole lives like that.
much of this psychologically is someone psychologically, just for whatever reason, not handling what stresses them out during the hours that they should be? And of course, this is me. I go through my day and I check off all the things that I know I have to get done that are relatively easy. They're a part of my job. They're a part of just running my household or whatever. But there are these other things that hang over my head that, oh, I didn't get that done again today, or what have you. But I'm like, it's going on the list for tomorrow, but really it's still in my brain. And it's what's keeping me up at night or waking me up early and those things. I mean, so there's psychology in just getting the hard stuff done during the day. It's stressing me out. I got to get it done. And versus the mind numbing kind of tackling Netflix instead or whatever, after, I don't know. I mean, there's so many aspects.
You need the
to
worksheet. You're the ideal client for the worksheet now. So like
I do.
And this is really common. This is how everybody is. All of us have built a life where it's impossible. And it makes sense, right? Because if I could complete my life every day, then why do I even need tomorrow, right? So nobody's going to complete their life. There's always going to be something to do tomorrow. And there's always going to be things that we feel like we don't really know how to do, or we don't quite have the resources, but we know we got to do them. And like, either we're going to procrastinate on those, we're going to ruminate on them, or we're going to like slowly drudge our way through them, or whatever our approach is. But all I'm trying to convince people is like, hey, I can't get rid of that. Like, that stress, that's real, that's life, that's the way it goes. And there's all sorts of mindfulness training, of course, and there's all sorts of things you can do to lower your stress. But those stressors don't go away. There's nothing you can do to lower your stressors. You can just lower your reaction to them, or just feel more prepared for them. And so, like, like on this worksheet, you'll see I tell people to make two lists. There's the to-do list, and then there's to worry list. The to-do list is obviously as far out as you think. I'm fortunate, and I think it's probably more of a masculine tendency in that I don't think more than probably a day ahead, like maybe 2 or 3 days if something really big is on the horizon. But most times, like, I look at my calendar the night before I go to bed, and I kind of go, okay, yeah, that's what I'm doing tomorrow. And that's it. Like, that's about as far out as I think. Some people think weeks, months ahead. So all that needs to be on your to-do list. Now there's the to worry list also. And the difference between the to-do list and the to worry list is the to worry list you don't have any control over, but you're going to worry about it. So all we're doing is making a list of it so that you don't forget to worry about it. Because what you have to do is convince yourself that you're going to handle everything when you're at your best. And in order to get to your best, you have to ignore everything while you're preparing for that. And so none of those things are allowed in your head. And if you're laying in bed and you wake up and you start thinking about something you need to do tomorrow, you're like, nope, that's on the list. I'm preparing. I'm getting myself ready for that. I'm not doing that now. Or to worry, like, it's on the list. I don't need to think about it right now. And if it's not on your list, you have my permission to turn the light on and write that. I literally say, this is a handwritten thing next to your bed, so that list is always there. And you don't make this you don't make this list right before bed, or you stress yourself out. Like, you make this, the to worry list will almost never change. You'll notice that after you do this for a while, it's like the same 6 things are on there for a year. The to-do list, right? That changes a little bit, but it ends up being remarkably consistent. And you just make sure you put it on your list. And then when people can wake up, and what I convince people of is, like, our goal is 8 hours of time in bed, recovering, repairing, and preparing, right? That's what you're doing. If you wake up in the middle of the night and you have to go to the bathroom, you get up and go to the bathroom, you come back, you lay down in bed, and you feel like you can't go back to sleep. What's the most common thought in your head? What time is it? How much more time do I have to go to sleep? What if I don't fall back to sleep, right? Now you're stressing yourself out. Stress, fight or flight is the highest stress hormones you'll ever have at any period in your life. Deep sleep is the lowest stress hormones you'll ever have in your life. They're polar opposites, right? So you need your stress hormones as low as possible. You can't sleep well with high stress hormones. So you have to convince yourself that I'm not going to allow myself to think about these things right now. I'm doing box breathing. I'm doing some other kind of breath work. I'm doing progressive muscle relaxation. I'm meditating. I'm laying here thinking about pleasant things. I'm building a bouquet in my mind. Like, I don't know, whatever you're doing, whatever it is that relaxes you. You don't look at your clock. You don't know what time it is. Your room's blacked out. So there's no cues so that you know that the sun's about to come up, whatever. And you just lay there until your alarm goes off.
Mhm.
And if your alarm's not going to go off for 4 hours, you're going to fall back asleep.
Yep.
And if your alarm clock goes off 30 minutes later and you didn't fall back to sleep, well, you got 7.5 hours of sleep and you meditated for 30 minutes. Good on you, right? And if that happens 3 times during the night, I don't care. And the biggest thing to do is just convince people all we're after is recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get really good at breath work, you get really good at meditation, you're like 3/4 of the way to the benefit of sleep. And if you're doing it in the middle of the sleep, you're probably even closer than that. You're probably 80-90% of the benefit of sleep, in small durations. And what will happen if you don't worry about it and you just say, this is my 8-hour recovery period, that's all I do in this period. Invariably, it will eventually be completely filled with sleep, and that's just the way it'll go. But it takes a while for that psychology to happen.
That's amazing. That's a really, really fascinating way to think about it. I actually wish we had one of these 3-hour podcast formats, because there's so many things that we want to talk about, but we don't have.
We can always do more. We can always do more podcasts.
I think we should. Yeah.
Like,
I think we should.
I'm always down to do more podcasts. So
No, this was cool because we got to hear, your journey through, in and out of the medical system into more of a coaching model. We got to learn a little bit about sleep, which I'd love to learn a lot more about on maybe a future episode. So a nice dance through the Kirk Parsley oeuvre. So folks are going to want to know where to track down the sleep checklist and how to follow you and catch up with everything you're doing. So why don't we start wrapping all that info?
Primalhealthcoach.com is the school.
okay. So wherever y'all send people, and we'll just do / oh no, I'm sorry, we should. So it's my URL, docparsley.com, and we'll do / whatever y'all want.
We could do Health Coach Radio, maybe the podcast.
Okay,
So
/ Health Coach Radio, and that's what we'll do. And then people can just go there. We'll just make a lander for your audience, and that they'll just get like a little. I'm not being smarmy, but you download it onto emails, so it's like, you gotta put your email in, and it'll get emailed to you. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do anything nefarious with your email, but just like that's the only way I know how to do it. So yeah, do that, and then like you take off the / docparsley.com is my URL with blogs and videos and lectures and the sleep remedies on there. Sleepremedy.com is its own thing, but you can find it out on Doc Parsley. So kind of like all my work is there on docparsley.com. And I think there's links in there to contact us for podcasts and lectures and whatever, all kinds of stuff. I'm honestly not very good at keeping up with that. My team is supposed to do it all really well, and I don't really follow up on them that much because I'm not passionate about it.
passionate about this. I love it. This was so great. Yeah. We have to have you back. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I'd love to.
This podcast was brought to you by Primal Health Coach Institute. To learn more about how to become a successful health coach, get in touch with us by visiting primalhealthcoach.com/call. Or if you're already a successful health coach, practitioner, influencer, or thought leader with a thriving business and an interesting story, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us at hello@primalhealthcoach.com and let us know why we need to interview you for Health Coach Radio. Thanks for listening.